What is a neighborhood? What is a neighborhood association? A neighborhood association is a voluntary entity that includes property owners, renters, businesses, and organizations within its boundaries. Now, the property owners might live outside the boundaries, but if they have property within the boundaries, then they're a member. And I think I've underlined voluntary because I think that's really, really important for everybody to remember. And for those of us who work with you to remember that you're all volunteers. You're giving of your time. That's really greatly appreciated. Time is very precious. So some key reasons neighborhood associations are formed. You probably all have your ideas, but these are ones that we often see: bringing neighbors together, having people get to know each other, establishing positive relationships, I think both within the neighborhood and with government and agencies and other places that you would like to have some collaboration with. Increasing communication, which I think is a really important role of neighborhood associations, particularly their officers, making sure that information gets out to members. And then the one that often is what leads people to forming neighborhood associations has to do with organizing efforts to address issues of concern. So many neighborhood associations often start because of an issue of concern, and that is what leads them to organizing. Not always, but that's a pretty frequent occurrence. And finally, initiating activities and projects, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more because I think that's one of the most exciting parts of what neighborhood associations do. So the important note: neighborhood associations are not homeowners associations. And I say this, I'm sure you're all very aware of it, but what we're finding is that a lot of people who don't know much about these things, haven't been involved, they hear the word association and they immediately think it's a homeowners association, and they're not interested. You know, they've heard things about homeowners association, about fees or restrictions. So I think it's really important, if you're working with people who are new to the association, not to assume they understand, but make sure that they understand that it's not a homeowners association. So we'll talk a little bit about the differences between these two. So neighborhood associations, and I think most of you know this, but I think it's always good to review this, and voluntary and includes renters, businesses, and organizations along with property owners. Again, renters are not included in HOA decision making, and Tucson has a very high rate of rents, and trying to find how to bring all these different parties together really makes a difference. NA's neighborhood associations are focused only on neighborhood advocacy and activities. Neighborhoods are registered by the city, which enables them to receive services. That's really the reason register with the city, is to receive the services. Neighborhood associations are self-regulated. They are not cities. They are not similar to boards, commissions, or boards, commissions, or any of those kinds of bodies. They do not have to follow open meeting law. What they have are their bylaws, and our hope is that associations are following their bylaws, but the city does not monitor that. I personally try, when I get a call, to have people pull out their bylaws and we talk them through. But I think that's really important to remember, because there is some confusion, and I hear it when people think that they're now city entities and they're under the rules of a city entity, and they're not. So I think that's really important. Neighborhood associations, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but as you know, are groups of property owners with legal authority to enforce rules. Membership mandatory, generally through rules tied to the ownership of property. Property owners pay fees. HOAs often own and maintain common property, something a neighborhood association doesn't do. And HOAs are primarily regulated by state law, not the city does not regulate HOAs. I think those are important things to understand. So how many neighborhood associations are there? Well, our city neighborhood association map currently shows 148 registered neighborhood association. Some neighborhood associations are active, some are inactive. I'd say, just as a ballpark, that probably 50 are really active at any good given time, maybe a few more than that. What do we mean by inactive? We don't have a precise definition. I think it would be helpful. I think that was a little clear, but generally it's neighborhoods who haven't communicated with us, haven't sent us any officer information for or more. And so I think that we're working on creating a map that would have 2 layers. It would actually be in Map Tucson, if you've ever used that, has a layer of neighborhood association. We'd like to have a layer that's active and a layer that's inactive, so that's clear, people. And then we can work with the inactive ones to see if they would like to reactivate. So where is neighborhood resources information found? Most of the information is found online. You, of course, Kyle and I are always happy to answer any questions, but most of you have probably used the online function, but I just thought I would just go through it quickly. I find the easiest way to do this is just to put in PDSD for Planning and Development Services Tucson in the browser, pull it up, go down the left-hand side, find neighborhood resources, click on that. You'll go to the homepage for neighborhood resources, which has a lot of information, some of it not necessarily organized terribly intuitively. We're working on that. And then if you go down to neighborhood associations and maps, you can click on that, put in the name of your neighborhood in the search bar and pull up the web page for your neighborhood. That lists when the neighborhood association was registered, what the boundaries are, what the offices are, and provides the bylaws. Now, I know a lot of you have looked at over the last year, have looked at your web page and let us know that it wasn't up to date. Kyle has been just working to try to get everything back up to date. And we apologize for that, but we also really appreciate you letting us know if you see that the information on those pages is not accurate. Sometimes it's because we didn't get an officer form, but often it's, realistically, we're a bit behind, but we're making every effort to catch up, and we appreciate you helping us by letting us know. Finally, the city is doing their website, and the new website is going to be launched pretty soon. This information will still be available, but it's probably going to be in a different format and an organization, and hopefully a little bit more intuitive than it is now. So keep an eye out for that. We'll let you know in a nugget when that actually is happening and what it means in terms of neighborhood resources. This, I think, may be the most important slide I'm going to show you tonight for basics, which is what are the responsibilities of neighborhood associations to maintain their city registration? They're pretty limited. That's not a really heavy burden. So the responsibilities include providing us with the annual meeting minutes with election results, and we don't have a specified format or template for this. It can be any way you want it. Probably almost most important is the completed officer information release forms. And we need those yearly, right after your elections. And we need them for both newly elected officers and re-elected officers. I know sometimes we don't get them for re-elected officers, but we really need to have those on a yearly basis. It's what we use to keep our database up, what we use to check, and sometimes people's information has changed. So those are the two real responsibilities for staying registered. So the last one is to provide us with any amendments to the bylaws that you have to have when you first register. And those, you may never amend your bylaws, so that's fine. But if you do, we need to see those to review them. And then we need to have the amended bylaws provided to us so we can post them. So what services does Neighborhood Resources provide? And I'll just go through this quickly. I think you know probably many of these, but maybe not all of them. We register neighborhood associations and we assist with reactivating inactive neighborhood associations. We had a lot of, well, for me, I've never seen as many reactivated neighborhood associations as I saw sort of shortly after COVID or just as COVID was ending. I think neighbors rediscovered their neighborhoods, which is great. We assist with boundary changes, mergers, and splits. We've recently, Barrio Kroger Lane changed its boundaries, and that was passed. But because they're within Menlo Park's boundaries, which is an awkward situation, Menlo Park agreed to that boundary change because it changes their boundaries. So we do these things not all the time, but we do mergers once in a while, splits once in a while, and then these boundary changes. We review bylaws and amendments to bylaws. And one of our big focuses to be sure that the bylaws haven't somehow turned into HOA bylaws, making sure there aren't restrictions on various people, the kinds of things you would see in an HOA. We do have a template that we provide, or actually it's a sample, but our bylaws, neighborhood association bylaws really vary. And one of the observations I would just make from over the years is I think some of them are a little too complicated, a volunteer group. So it's hard to sort of stay on top of all the pieces, but that's just my observation from having worked with the number of association on bylaw issues. We maintain records of the important registration application, bylaws, amendments to bylaws, annual meeting minutes, and officer information forms. We maintain the Neighborhood Resources webpage and regularly update officer information. And as I say, we're working really hard to just make that a regular feature so we don't get in this situation that we were in for a bit of just being sort of behind the 8 ball. We provide one city-funded mailing per fiscal year, which is July to June, and I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. We assist with securing roll-offs for cleanups. You can also go directly to Environmental and General Services. They have an application, but we're always happy to assist. We reserve public facilities for meetings. I don't know if anybody on this phone call has been in this situation, but we've had to talk to a few associations. Our risk management office is having some concerns about the way the insurance is done with the schools, and we're trying to work through that so that we can continue to use the schools and make the schools available for these meetings. We prepare the neighborhood nugget. We attend neighborhood association meetings and events if requested, and sometimes if not requested. If an event sounds like fun, I just show up. And we answer tons of questions from neighborhood associations, from ward offices, and other city departments. Ward offices are wonderful, very collaborative. We work together. I know for many of you, they're probably the first place you call. So we try to really stay in touch. And I thought I would just put the mailing guidelines in. It's our probably most frequently used service. And again, I know a lot of you know this, but I wanted to use it as an opportunity to point out that the fiscal year is coming to an end. And so there is a window of opportunity still, if you haven't used your mailing this year, to get a mailing in, but we really need it by June 1st because we have to, all the invoicing has to be done. If we get it by June 1st, our vendor, wonderful vendor, AZJet Mail, will says they will be able to get the invoices to the city. So keep that in mind if you, and we're always happy to help you if you have any questions. A mailing can be a postcard up to a 4-page newsletter. We pay for black and white printing, but you can make arrangements for color printing if you want to pay the difference. And we have any number of neighborhoods that do that periodically, not all the time, obviously. Neighborhood resources staff reviews city-funded mailings for 2 things primarily: advertising or campaign material, which is not allowed in city-funded communication. What you do with your own funds is up to you, but not with a city-funded mailing. And the other thing is, you know, we sometimes will point out a typo or whatever, if and you can decide whether you want that changed. We require 10 days for postcards and 18 days for newsletters, in addition to any advance notice required in your bylaws. If you, a lot of your bylaws say people should get this 7 days ahead of a notice of a meeting, or 10 days, or if you have 2 days. So you kind of want to add that. Now, I'll be really straightforward about this. A lot of you get your mailings to us in a little less than this required time, and we almost always are able to make it work, but we don't, you know, it's really great if you can try to stay in this time frame. Our vendor, again, is great. They sort of go above and beyond, but there's only so many times that we feel we can kind of ask that of them. So we appreciate you trying to give us a little more rather than a little less time, but we do whatever we can to try to make it all work out. And then something I always like to remind neighborhoods is that we negotiated with environmental and general services some years ago to allow a little bit of additional type to go on the cleanup card, the postcard that you can have them send out if you order roll-offs for a cleanup. So there's a place that you can do like a meeting reminder if you'd like, or something that fits in the little place they have. So take advantage of that. If you're doing a postcard for a cleanup, you have this opportunity to have a few extra words that can let people know about an event or a meeting, and that's just a nice piece. The neighborhood nugget. The neighborhood nugget is something that I actually started some years ago because I thought we needed more, something that kept in touch with neighborhood associations on a more regular basis. It was designed to be a nugget of information that's directed to officers. The information ranges from notices that are really directed to the officers with some particular information, like tonight's session, or information on events that we hope the officers would share with neighborhood association members. One of the things I think is really important, and it varies in neighborhood association, again, this is totally up to you, it's my observation, is that that's sometimes a place that breaks down a little, that information that gets to officers doesn't go further that would be useful to others. Now, sometimes people are compiling listservs and that takes a while, and understood. But the other thing to try to remember is that there are still people who don't have the resources for computers. There are some people who don't use them. So if there's a way you could post information someplace, or there's some alternative to getting it by listserv, that can be useful also, but that's again just an observation. So here's my favorite part of neighborhood association. This is what makes me most excited about neighborhood association, which is all the great things you do that I think are really unsung. And if you really start to look at what neighborhood associations do, that both contribute to the neighborhood, but to the community as a whole, it's pretty amazing. And Kyle has been working on putting a story map together. We're hoping there's ways we can get more information out about this, more sharing. But I just had fun putting images together. This is not in any way comprehensive, but as you can see, neighborhoods do park developments, celebrations, yearly events. I think this is Garden District with their Porch Fest, graffiti removal, cleanups, potlucks, historic designation initiated by neighborhoods, neighborhood identification sign, which Department of Transportation and Mobility helps with, area plans, neighborhood plans initiated by neighborhood associations. And then the one to the far right, I enjoyed because I wasn't aware of this. Barrio Hollywood apparently had an open mic, or has an open mic event, which I thought sounded like fun. And just because I got so excited about this, I had to do another page. So some more water harvesting, traffic calming, neighborhood association websites, online neighborhood newsletters. We'd like to do some trainings on both of those for neighborhood associations who might like a little training on how to do an online newsletter or a website. We have some neighborhoods that have very talented people who would, I think, be happy to help with that kind of training. Tree plantings, Trees for Tucson obviously helps with that. Lit-free libraries, which are quite popular around Tucson. Public art, this is a mural that's in, let's see, where's this one? Is in Pueblo. Which one is this? I'm forgetting right now. I'll come back to that. Then community gardens. Palo Verde Park is where the mural is, and that's quite stunning that they did. So I think you should all pat yourselves on the back. This is what it's all about. It's so many contributions that I think it would be great if the community was more aware of. And then finally, we've got our contact information. I don't expect you to write this down. As I say, this will get posted. The one thing that we would love you to do when you send us an email is to put the name of the neighborhood association in the subject line. We really are sorry that we don't always immediately link a name with neighborhood association. I wish we were better at that. We try, but it just helps us a whole lot. The other thing that is really helpful is if you would, when you send me an email or Kyle an email, if you will also put in the neighborhood email address, neighborhood@tucsonaz.gov. That means it lands in two places, which is very helpful when we have limited staff to it land in two places. So those are just little asks that we have, and if you're able to do that, we'd greatly appreciate it. And finally, I hope most of you by now have gotten your nugget that went out today and is noticing our next event, which is a workshop called Awesome Meetings Every Time, which will be facilitated by the Center for Community Mediation and Facilitation, which is, well, I expect many of you are familiar. The center was with Our Family Services for many, many years. They split last June. They're reforming themselves. They're back in action. And we're really excited to have them do this. This is something that they have designed, and I've done trainings with them, and I think it will be great. The trick here is that I got them to go up from 20, a max of 20 to 25, but I couldn't get them to go further because this is really designed for a limited number. So what we're doing is taking first come, first serve. I understand we've already got 9 or 10 people who have registered, and we will, if we see enough interest beyond the 25, we will schedule an additional session. We've already talked to the center about that. So that's not a maybe, that's a we will do that. So if you're interested, get your name in. So I just want to thank you all for all you do on behalf of your neighborhood association. It really makes a difference. I know it doesn't always feel that way. I know a lot of you are giving a lot of hours that don't always feel as if they're appreciated or as if they're achieving a goal, but it does make a difference, and we so appreciate it. And finally, our question is, how did we do with the basics? So if you add in the chat anything about which you still have questions, that would be great. And any comments are gladly accepted. Kyle and Alex are going to look at those. They're going to provide me with comments that maybe I can provide some answers to. But the other thing we will do is we will use what you have shared with us to refine this presentation further. Additionally, we will transcribe everything we get and provide it to you with answers where we have them. And just really, really grateful for your time this evening. Thank you very much.